Now, government has withdrawn a controversial green paper that sparked intense debate and something of an outcry in South Africa. Today, the Minister of Social Development, Lindiwe Zulu, withdrew her department's green paper on comprehensive social security and retirement reform, which was gazetted 2 weeks ago. Now, the paper proposed that all South African earners pay up to 12% of their income into a new government-managed investment fund. It would provide retirement, disability benefits and unemployment benefits to all. But there were concerns about the impact on investment and government's ability to manage that system. Zulu's department says since its publication, there has been widespread commentary on the recommendations. It says some of the technical aspects were not well understood and need clarification. The paper had many critics, but also fans. The chair of the Social Security Systems Administration and Management Studies at Wits says comprehensive social security reform for South Africa remains essential. Professor Alex Van Der Heever joins us now. Professor, thank you for being with us as always. Firstly, on a very simple level, are you disappointed that the Green Paper has been withdrawn?
I think at two levels, yes. I mean, on the one hand, the withdrawal of the paper means that there is a debate that we're not going to have. And it's a question as to whether there has been a very serious and concerted effort to prevent there from being a public dialogue. Because I do not believe that the Green Paper's recommendations as they stood in the paper would have been the framework that would have emerged out of a proper consultative process. So that's, I think, the first issue. The second issue that I think is really concerning is the absence of a coherent government platform for this debate to happen. I think it's unacceptable that we have National Treasury saying one thing, Department of Social Development saying another, the Presidency is silent, and the Department of Employment and Labour saying nothing. And they're all involved and implicated in this overall proposal and have all been part of the contents that were in the Green Paper itself. So government basically has to get its act together, and it can't just be a single department taking this forward. It has to be that there is a serious effort and a serious platform to discuss this. It's too large an issue.
Well, isn't the problem that the Minister, Lindiwe Zulu, took it forward without going to Cabinet first, without speaking to Treasury meaningfully about the numbers, apparently ignoring a lot of the debates that have already taken place at NEDLAC and just putting out that and then having to withdraw it?
That's not my understanding. I mean, there have been 4 years of discussions for some or other reason at NEDLAC, which are basically kept out of the public eye. And the numbers that are actually contained in the Green Paper are those that emerge from an interdepartmental task team on social security chaired by National Treasury. The very specific proposals that came out of that process are indicative numbers that are included in the Green Paper. Now, I'm not saying that should be the final proposal or that the key framework should be specifically as stated in the Green Paper, but I just want to know what National Treasury and the Department of Social Development were doing in the same process for 4 years and then don't seem to be on the same page.
Yeah.
I think government must answer that, and it's unacceptable.
All right. Do you understand the concern that many people have? And it's not the issue about whether or not we need social reform or not, but it seems to be all about government's ability to take trillions of rand more from taxpayers and manage it well. Can you understand the concern given what is coming out in state capture and what is coming out generally?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that the issue about this is that we basically need to have coherent governance in government going forward. The fact that we've had corruption to date doesn't mean that government basically sits on its backside now for the next 10 years and does absolutely nothing. We need public institutions. We need to have coherent reforms. We can't have unambitious, partial reforms when after 27 years we haven't addressed the failures of the social security system in South Africa and the pension system in the private sector. So in terms of the tax proposals that were in that, they were clearly misrepresented misrepresented in the public domain. They were proposals which substitute for contributions in a defined benefit and pay-as-you-go type arrangement. That doesn't actually divert huge amounts of additional money into government. It actually does the opposite. This is where the concern does lie, as I've pointed out in the paper that I've made public. The large concern that comes from the pension fund industry is the fact that switching from a defined benefit to pay-as-you-go for a portion of South Africa's retirement system removes assets under management, and that removes a whole revenue stream from them. That's why they're jumping up and down. Now, that particular issue does need to be dealt with in the way final reforms are proposed. But the way in which it was framed was that it was like another national health insurance proposal. Yeah. And that was done deliberately to misrepresent us, to kill us having a public conversation on our social security system.
So
and I think that
Can you explain that? Because I think Alexander Forbes, which is one of the biggest administrators of pension funds in South Africa, has said that it could lose like 60% of its members if this goes ahead. So are you saying private companies are feeling threatened and that's what's happening?
So what you have is a system that has evolved in South Africa because we effectively have unlike many countries in the world, we don't have a social insurance tier for our retirement provision and for death and disability protection. And so we have a very weak framework which is largely based on a private framework which is voluntary and therefore incomplete in terms of its protection. So the Alexander Forbeses and those groups are rightfully concerned that if you create a social insurance system that substitutes for coverage they're currently providing, they lose business. The question in a final system, and should have come out of a process of negotiation and discussion, and I don't know what they were doing for 4 years in NEDLAC, what should have come out was a framework which doesn't involve a huge zero-sum game result for the retirement industry and for the financial services industry, but does introduce a tier of social protection for many people, including us, that don't really have a coherent protection going into retirement and also for death and disability. It's about creating a set of benefits that are guaranteed for a large swathe of the South African population which are not protected. But it also deals with the harmonization between social assistance benefits as well as contributory benefits. That's benefits where you contribute for an earnings-related pension, death or disability coverage. It also deals with the harmonization and or the consolidation of the certain of the benefits in the compensation fund, the unemployment insurance fund, the road accident fund, which I'm afraid are a mess at the moment. So all of those are in this process. Now it's very big, and the problem with it is that there are many, many vested interests because they're incumbents within the system. And that creates complications. It makes it a complex reform. And for a complex reform, you actually have to have a process which is equal to that complexity, because you're going to have to deal with the incumbents in such a way that you do not just wreck the system that is, trying to put in place a system that should be. And I think that is the important conversation we require. And it is in fact what should have emanated out of the NEDLAC process, at least as a point of departure for a green paper. And I'll tell you now why it didn't happen. It didn't happen because essentially National Treasury and the industry were sitting out that process because COSATU had forced them to have this discussion in order to get mandatory annuitization in place, which was a real nice money spinner for the industry, but they weren't terribly interested in discussing social security reform. So they basically did nothing but delay for 4 years. And I think that I would argue that at this point in time it was out of frustration that the green paper was put out to actually have a decent conversation. Now I think we have to have that conversation, and government basically has to ensure that it occurs, but it does not have to and should not result in wrecking either the public sector social insurance funds or the retirement industry.
All right, well, thank you for that explanation. That was Professor Alex Van Der Heever, Chair of Social Security Systems Administration and Management Studies at Wits University, saying that Green Paper may have been withdrawn. But yes, the debate around what it raised should still be raging. Let's take a look at weather. Lots more to come on The Full View.